Back in 2020, 50 countries around the world signed an agreement to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. But how much do you know about their efforts? Join me on a journey of discovery behind the scenes to find out what Geely has been doing since long before that agreement was signed. You join me here today in the Chinese province of Guizhou, and we're on the hunt for some alcohol. No, not the world famous baijiu, or maotai as you may know it, which originates from this region, but rather methanol. We're here in the beautiful city of Guiyang, the largest, if not the only, methanol ecosystem in all of China. We're going to go deeper under the surface to find out why methanol is so prominent here and exactly what Geely has to do with it. Behind me you'll see a fuel station, but this fuel station is unlike most of the fuel stations that you will find in China, and that's because right over at the back you'll see a pump labelled M100. That means that the pump serves methanol fuel. And while that's rare across most of China, here in Guiyang it's a very frequent sighting. The number one reason for that is the city's taxi fleet, over 90% of which runs on methanol, like this car, the Geely M-Grand M100. In fact, methanol taxis have been running around Guiyang since 2015 and have driven more than 10 billion kilometers in total. But what do the taxi drivers themselves think about these methanol M-Grands and the benefits that they bring? Best the only way to find out is to hail one for ourselves and ask them. 师傅你好，我去吉利工厂。本次乘客您好，欢迎您乘坐本公司出租车。So how does the overall performance of this car compare to a traditional petrol car?
这个车子开起来基本上没有什么声音。和其他的那个汽油车，它就听得到发动机的声音。
So how much does it cost to run the car for a week?
一天我跑个200-300公里，300公里以上的话就是70-80块钱左右。如果200多公里就是50块钱，7天的话就是500多块钱吧。
How does that cost compare to the price of running a traditional petrol car?
能省汽油的话，起码省一半。
So how beneficial is it that you can run the car on both petrol and on methanol as well?
它这个汽油和甲醇。 好处是没有甲醇了，加不了甲醇了，没有电了之后，它用汽油可以给你行驶，而且如果是烧甲醇、净烧甲醇的话，汽油是浪费不掉的，它汽油是永远在的，它只给你起一个点火作用，就是。
So how beneficial is it to have a large trunk in this car as opposed to on the LNG gas cars where often the gas tank takes up a lot of space in the boot?
加湿加气的。 我们这就没有，而且我们的好处在哪里呢？我们这个不用充电桩，虽说是混动的用电，40码以下基本上是在用电，它是自动转换，不用我们去找充电桩充电。这个后备箱和这个车的座位空间是特别大的，所以很多客人坐上来都嫌我们这空间很大，比他们的一般的出租车的空间都大。 而且这个比加油的钱省下来啊，这就是我们的活宝，就是我们自家的收入啊。意思我的燃料不足了，我去补点甲醇。
啊，好了，好 ，OK。Okay, so while our driver gets his daily refill of methanol, he's already told us about the economical and practical benefits that the M100 hybrid brings to the drivers of Guiyang. However, personally, I like to drive, so let's go and try one out for ourselves. Okay, so we've tried out the hybrid as a passenger and we've spoken to the taxi drivers, but what better way to get a feel for this car than to take it for a drive here, right outside the factory where this one has just been made on the test track. Let's give it a go. So we're going to take the Geely M Grand M100 hybrid out for a drive to get an idea of how the powertrain works in and how it feels to actually drive. So once we get going, at the moment it's totally quiet. We're in full EV mode and the engine hasn't kicked in. At that point, you just hear the engine kick in. So it's very seamless. It's a little bit louder, obviously, because everything's louder than an electric powertrain, but it was totally seamless in how it worked. Now at this point I understand it's not driving the wheels, which means that it shouldn't really make any change to the way that it drives, and actually it does feel fairly rapid, it does feel pretty quick. Now the motor actually has pretty much the same output figures as the engine, and the engine is never driving on its own, it's only driving with the electric motor. So that's when you go into overtake mode. If we start to accelerate now, that's when you feel all the power coming in. You get the combination of the electric motor and the engine together, and it really feels, that's quite beneficial actually. If you need to do a quick overtake in town or you're out on the motorway, that's when it will really start to be quite useful. And actually it doesn't actually feel that bad to drive either, despite the fact that it's a fairly basic car on the whole. But now we're back down at 40 kilometers per hour. See, all the sound's gone again. We're back into full electric mode. So really, for normal driving around town, if you're driving within the speed limit, the chances are it's going to be a very pleasant driving experience, very, very quiet and comfortable. So it's really cool actually, very seamless, and actually it's not a bad car to be in. It's pretty attractive. We've got this quite cool green stuff here on the dashboard to show that it's the green version, and because this is most likely going to be going out into the city over there to be a taxi for the rest of its life. Cool. The introduction of methanol taxis here in Guiyang has helped to reduce the city's reliance on oil by 8%, and they're part of a much wider initiative to help preserve the city's beautiful natural landscape and also to reduce traffic pollution. Geely's involvement in methanol isn't just limited to taxis and passenger vehicles. In fact, their exploration into methanol dates back to 2005. But things took a more serious turn when they invested in a little-known Icelandic company, Carbon Recycling International, in 2015. At this factory, on the outskirts of Reykjavik, they take carbon dioxide collected from the naturally occurring volcanic activity on Iceland and turn it into methanol fuel. Inspired by this, and the possibility to perform a similar act with the unwanted carbon dioxide emissions from China's heavy industry, Geely brought this technology over to China and built the first carbon dioxide to methanol recycling plant in the country, in Anyang. Every year, the plant captures 160,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions from industrial processes and converts them into 110,000 tonnes of methanol. So while using methanol as a fuel in cars still produces carbon dioxide, the process means that carbon dioxide only enters the atmosphere once, rather than twice if petrol cars were used. In addition, methanol is a much cleaner burning fuel, emitting 99% less sulfur oxides, 60% less nitrogen oxides, and produces 75% less particulate matter. In fact, CO2 emissions on first generation M Grand M100s were tested at just 46 grams per kilometre, which compares to 116.3 grams per kilometre for the average car in Europe in 2022. But Geely isn't limiting this technology to just taxis and passenger vehicles. They're extending it to trucks too, like this one here. These trucks are currently operating in several cities across China. In some cases, benefiting from the methanol infrastructure being built at ports, since the fuel is increasingly being used for ships to reduce CO2 emissions in the shipping industry. So while the world steadily transitions to cleaner and ideally emission-free fuel sources, Geely's pioneering use of carbon recycling and methanol-powered vehicles shows that there are meaningful alternatives that we can utilise today to help bridge the gap and bring about significant net reductions in CO2 and other harmful emissions.